You're listening to The Back 40, the podcast for Ontario farmers, covering topics and issues that matter most to Ontario agriculture. Brought to you by Trillium Mutual Insurance, bringing the ag community together one podcast at a time. I'm the host of The Back 40, Mike Bryan, agribusiness specialist at Trillium Mutual Insurance. Since March of 2020, I think we've all had to make some fairly drastic changes in our lives. Pandemic certainly has imposed a fair bit of restriction upon what we're able to do and how we're able to be out and what's safe to do and how we're safe to gather with other people. I remember my last day in the office was March 13th before we were told basically to go home for a few weeks until this all blew over. And I'm still doing a majority of my work from home. I haven't been into the office all that much. We certainly have heard a lot of negative stories about the restrictions that have been placed upon us. But along with those negative stories, we've also heard from some of our guests about some real successes during the pandemic. Jackie Fraser of Freybert's Foods actually put it best when she said, I think I'm going to write a book, How the Pandemic Saved My Business. So it's not like there haven't been a lot of cases there where this has been an extremely successful pivot for people to be able to continue to do business during the pandemic. We're talking today with Kelly Daynard. We're really pleased to have Kelly back again. She's the Executive Director of Farm and Food Care Ontario. Previous to that, she worked for the Ontario Farm Animal Council, where she started in 2005. And of course, that's the organization that grew into Farm and Food Care Ontario. Prior to that, she was with the Ontario Cattlemen's Association, or as it's known now, the Beef Farmers of Ontario. And she grew up on a farm near Guelph. But we're really pleased to have her back because she was our very first guest on the Back 40. Kelly, welcome back to the Back 40.
Hey, thanks for having me back. I'm delighted to be here.
I think for a lot of us, we never expected that the pandemic would continue on this long. And certainly initially it was just, well, we'll just figure out a way to do this for a few weeks. How do you think businesses have adapted to this? Certainly the ones that have been successful, that used to like to be in front of people. What's been the key to adapting to that?
My gosh, I can tell you that in March 2020, when our team here went home, and I naively said to them, we'll see you in a couple of weeks. I think it's about that saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. It's really good that none of us knew how long this would take because you could approach it in kind of bite-sized chunks. Early days, we were looking at those first 3 months. Our next big event was going to be in June 2020. We had a wonderful farm family lined up for a breakfast on the farm. Certainly those first few weeks for us were just immense anxiety and uncertainty as I looked at a business plan that we had carefully crafted full of events and suddenly realized that we were likely not going to be able to do 90% of our business plan. But I just have to give all the credit to our team here because the incredible brainstorming sessions that started coming on a platform like, Zoom, started to explore ways that we could do what we do in different ways. And I'm a fundamental optimist. I always have been, but I think that farm and food care is far stronger for the experiences we've had because COVID has forced us to go places that we wouldn't likely have gone on our own. Looking back on 2 years, I'm eager to get back out doing real things, but we've had a lot of success and there's so many examples like that. Jackie Fraser, who is a former executive director of ours here, her business is a great example of that. You just see so many shining examples of resilience and growth.
I think that ability to think outside the box has certainly been key for those that have done well during the pandemic. Now, to be fair, there's some businesses that simply can't adapt to it just because of the nature of the business. But for those of us, like we used to do trade shows probably in the neighborhood of 25 to 30 days a year. And all of a sudden that was gone. And you don't reach your customer that way. We used to have brokers into the office. That doesn't happen anymore. We had to find another way to do that. As you mentioned, the Zoom certainly is a great channel. And there's lots of other platforms out there as well, GoToMeeting. We've learned to adapt to that. But you talked about that breakfast on the farm as being an example. That's something that you would think, well, that's done. We can't do that. We'll need to go directly away. But you adapted that. you changed how you did that and made that a success as well.
In 2020, there wasn't enough known about the world that we were living in. So 2020, we didn't do any events like that. But then 2021, the team said, okay, you know what? We need to get back out. Not that we weren't out virtually, but we needed to be back out doing something. So we approached three of our fair board members, the Carp Agricultural Society, the Lindsay Exhibition, and Western Fair in London, and basically said, we've got this crazy idea. Would you help us execute it? And oh my gosh, Mike, they were fun. Each one had about 350 cars come through, and that's an awful lot of cars to come through an exhibit. And so, we were set up in a big parking lot. It wasn't the same as a breakfast on the farm, but holy cow, it was the next best thing. And so people drove through an organized exhibit area, past feed trucks, past combines, past tractors, past TMR mixers, past pens of animals. And in front of each of them, farmers were talking about, guess how much this piece of equipment costs, or this is a dairy cow. We had adorable 4-H kids at a couple of them, haltering up their heifers and walking their heifers up and down the line of cars. And I mean, I've got gorgeous photos of heifers sticking their nose into windows of cars so that kids could pat them. Of course, all of our farmers were masked and we did it socially distanced. And then at the end of each of the breakfast events, they popped their trunks and they got the most incredible breakfast bag full of eggs and milk and pancake mix and local fruits and vegetables and sausage or bacon or beef jerky, depending on where we were, cheese, butter. The bag was just jammed full. And then the encouragement was, take this home and make breakfast for yourself at home. It's breakfast from the farm. They were fun. They were successful. I burst into tears walking into the Lindsay one and seeing some of my favorite volunteers who I haven't seen in 2 years. I just got all emotional, but so it may have been as good for the volunteers as it was for the guests. But we are in the early stages of planning some more for this year.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people, certainly in the middle of the pandemic, people were looking for something to do. They were looking to get out of their house, tired of being cooped up. They're looking for something to do that would have to contribute to the success of getting people out to see what was going on and to learn about modern agriculture.
Absolutely. So I think I can announce it here. Our first one will be in the first Saturday of June, and we're partnering with the Paris Agricultural Society for that one. So lots more details coming out about that one in the weeks ahead.
That's good to know. Now, at some point here, I'm assuming you're going to try and get back to a breakfast on the farm as well. And none of us know when that's going to be able to happen. What do you think the major difference? Certainly the number of people through, but do you think the engagement was the same that you get with the breakfast on the farm for the breakfast from the farm?
I wasn't sure it was going to be, but I watched the interaction those days, and every carload stopped at every spot, asked questions of the farmers or, engaged about the feed truck or the combine. One of our fun farmers in London told every school kid that he was trying to raise money to buy that combine, and did they have $2 in their pocket? And he was a real hit, but the engagement was amazing. In fact, at one point we had to go around and tell the farmers, like, speed it up, don't take the car for as long as you are, because the lineup of cars waiting to get in was astronomical. So we actually had to speed up the process a bit because they were asking so many questions. It was awesome. We just had a great time, and the feedback we got, because we send out an evaluation to attendees afterwards, like 10 out of 10 was all of the results. They just, when are you coming back to our area? So it was great. It was fun.
It's amazing you're forced into trying something that probably under normal circumstances wouldn't have been so successful if people hadn't been looking for an outlet there. I think that's maybe consistent with a lot of different things that we've tried. If we had tried these 3 years ago, people would have said, no, you know what? I don't want that. I don't want to stay in my car. I want to get out. I want to see the farm. I want to do all of this. But that willingness of people to say, you know what, I'll take anything at this point. I think that contributes to the success, whether an in-person event like you did with Breakfast from the Farm, or whether that's a virtual training event there, that willingness of people to accept something different has really contributed to a lot of the success that we may have had online.
I think absolutely. And I mean, that has been the case with kind of all of our programming over the last couple of years, both on the public trust consumer outreach side. And then we do an awful lot of training. We even held a virtual gala at the last couple of years that really seemed to hit a sweet spot in Ontario agriculture. And none of our programming right now looks the same as it did back in February 2020. Moving forward, I think our business plan, it'll change as a result of this. We'll eventually go back to a hybrid of in-person and virtual options.
Because we've been forced into it, there's a lot of times here that some of the things we've tried haven't necessarily worked. And other things we look at, I can remember where we used to travel to a 1 hour meeting. And it's like, I don't want to travel to a 1 hour meeting for an hour and a half each way. And we do these virtually now, and they're extremely successful. And then you can get on with your day very, very quickly.
You know, it's funny. I was talking to a grain farmer last night on the phone, and he was laughing about how he had never gotten to our gala in person because he was usually harvesting crops that week. And he says, then when you hold a virtual gala and I can just come in off the combine to my kitchen table and participate, he said, that worked for me. It's interesting because we're actually attracting a much larger audience to our work and our events than we ever did in person. Moving forward, I think the future looks bright.
I think so. And you touched on something there that a lot of organizations have actually quite struggled with. We used to have in-person events, be it some sort of a gala or some sort of a programming that different organizations relied upon those in order to fundraise. And you talked about a virtual gala there replacing your in-person event. How did that work?
Oh my gosh. So when my team came to me and they said, you know, we've got this kind of crazy idea and please don't say no. My gut reaction was, we joke about it here now, but I think I said, A, don't lose money on this, and B, don't make us look silly. 2 gala in the boxes later, they are the best kitchen party maybe that Ontario agriculture has ever seen. I think we put out 150 boxes the first year. And then this past November, I think it was about 220 boxes we sent out across Ontario. The box was chock full of fabulous Ontario products and beverages. And then it had a shopping list. So you went to your local grocery store, bought the ingredients, and then we had a chef do a cook along. There was a gorgeous veal appetizer. There was an amazing turkey main course. Ontario apple growers had put together this delightful recipe that I would have never tried on my own for an apple dessert. And there was a live auction. It raised about double what our in-person galas have ever raised for us, about $25,000. You know, we had people on there participating from Thunder Bay, from Windsor, from Ottawa, from all over Ontario that likely wouldn't have driven to Guelph for our in-person event. People want to get back together. They want to connect. So this year we'll probably do a hybrid event with an in-person option and then some people that maybe from more remote parts of Ontario could cook along at home. We're excited to try the next iteration of the gala.
I think that's a key to a lot of this. Like we look at how we've done business in the past, and you're right, we want to get back to that in person, but we don't want to give up a lot of the advantages that we saw from going virtually. And there's a lot of hybrid things that are going to happen when we get back to the point where we can be in the same room together.
Yeah, moving forward, it'll be the best of both, I hope.
I think that's something that we've missed is the opportunity to meet people and the opportunity to reach people that we wouldn't otherwise. Every year at the trade show or at various industry events, and other times it's somebody brand new that we have a 5 or a 10-minute conversation with. And I think that's maybe the biggest thing that we miss is those incidental conversations that we used to have that we don't get anymore.
Yeah, communications is a lot more deliberate now. And I look forward to the day where you'll have those random conversations again.
Is your organization in need of funding for a capital project? Trillium Mutual's Roots Community Fund provides funding towards projects such as renovations, expansions, and equipment purchases that support rural Ontario. Roots helps ensure that these organizations will remain a crucial part of the local community. To learn more about Roots, including how to apply, visit our website at trilliummutual.com and click Community at the top of the page. Now, one thing that I've noticed, as mentioned before, I've had do a lot of training sessions with our partners where we have individual brokers that came into our office. And of course, that's not happened. And so we've gone online. And that virtual training has really changed, to my mind, it's been a game changer. It's great to have people in a classroom, but you talked about reaching people all over the province. That's one of the advantages. How has Farm and Food Care Ontario changed what their offerings are?
All of our training used to be in person. I do a lot of media training each year with farmers. Farm and Food Care is well known for its Speak Up program, encouraging people to tell their stories to whatever audience they come across. We also do some work in the area of livestock emergency training, where we used to bring fire departments down to a common parking lot and bring in a livestock trailer. And we work with a trained first responder talking about there is a livestock transportation emergency, and that truck is full of cattle or pigs, and there's a rollover on the side of a highway. How do you deal with it? And they were really, really expensive to run. Expensive for the firefighters to get to the course, expensive to bring in the trucks, expensive to rent a parking lot, meals. We took those online last year, and full disclosure, in a great partnership with Trillium Mutual and some other mutual insurance companies around Ontario, we were able to turn those courses virtual. We brought in a videographer and we filmed a livestock truck and the first responder kind of working his way around it, talking about different structure systems on it. And then we found an old truck that had been in a wreck that he could cut apart on camera. And we offered those up free to fire departments in Ontario who were also looking for ways of continuing their training in a virtual world. So it's been amazing. We used to train, 40 to 80 firefighters in a year in person in parking lots in Ontario. In the last year, we've trained about 330, and we've still got 5 more sessions to go in the next month. Now fire departments are coming to us to say, hey, would you come on our Monday night training session and, train these 40 firefighters in Waterloo Region or in Bruce County or any of the major routes that livestock trucks are coming through every day? And it's just been a phenomenal success. The responses we're getting back from firefighters thanking us for the course and then asking if they can take it again, when we can offer training to those firefighters up in Bruce Mines, way up in northern Ontario, and they don't have to leave their homes. And you think of how many cattle trucks come through northern Ontario on their way to the south. It's been a surprising and remarkable success story for us, and we're delighted with that kind of response.
I don't think any of us would have suspected that we could see that kind of success. And yet, as you said, it's really expensive to run that in person. Firefighters, a lot of them volunteer fire departments, Monday night training. But if you're more than an hour away from wherever you're setting that up, they're not going to come. They can't. It's too expensive for them to get there. And that ability to reach, you're centered out of Guelph, so you can reach somebody in Ottawa, you can reach somebody in Thunder Bay. That's in the opposite ends of the province there, and it's no more difficult than dealing with somebody that's sitting at a desk in Guelph itself.
It's amazing to us how some of our experiments have turned out. Just before COVID, we had tried for Canada's Ag Day, recognizing that Canada's Ag Day is always in the middle of February. February 2020, we had tried a virtual field trip, partnering with our sister group Agscape on the classroom side. So we experimented in the month before COVID. And since then, oh my gosh, have they taken off. And we have hosted virtual field trips in poinsettia greenhouses, fish farms, hog barns and chicken barns and egg barns and dairy farms and beef farms, Christmas trees. We went to a Christmas tree farm last year, viticulture, potatoes, beekeeping, cheese making, Gerbera daisies, and all of those farmers just with their smartphone did a half-hour, 45-minute tour through their farm or greenhouse or orchard. And the reach of those 26 tours last year, we had about 280,000 people watch those tours from their classrooms or their home. Teachers were looking for opportunities for their classrooms, and it was fun. Like each one of those virtual field trips, kids could ask questions in real time. You'd see Miss Smith's grade 4 class come on and ask a question of the farmer, and he or she would answer it in real time. And again, it's the cost of a smartphone and good internet reception, although in some cases, when we had poor internet reception, the farmer recorded the video and then sat live on the stream and answered questions. So there were ways of adapting. But again, just another example of an experiment that seemed to hit a sweet spot.
I'm going to go back a few years here when my wife and I vacationed in Washington, and we went through one of the Smithsonian museums down there. And there was a session there that they were talking to dairy farmers out of Wisconsin and answering questions for people on them. And I thought, and that's really cool that we can do that. And always the thought being like, it's somebody with the resources of the Smithsonian that pulls that together. And now we're talking about, well, you just grab your smartphone and you go out through there and people will watch. And I can't imagine 5 years ago thinking that we could get that kind of engagement from any sort of online program that we put up.
There was a sheep farm tour in the Ottawa Valley last June, and I think Farmer Chris had about 5,000 students watching live. So Agscape, our sister group on the educator side, does an amazing job of the engagement with teachers, encouraging them to watch. And then we look after the farm side, picking those farmer hosts or food processing facilities and working with them on the technology.
Now, you also have, as part of your website, there's the Farm 360. Those are great tours that take you through operations that you wouldn't otherwise go through. And they're not the live tours that you're talking here. What's the response been on that? Has that seen an uptick as well?
Huge increase in visitors to the Farm Food 360 website. We just launched 4 new tours in January of 2022. So last year we partnered with Veal Farmers of Ontario, Grain Farmers of Ontario, Mushrooms Canada, and then Ontario Genomics, which was a really interesting project to work on. So we did tours for those 4 groups, and they went live in January of 2022. And later this year, you'll see 3 more coming live in time for the 100th anniversary of the Winter Fair. People, again, are looking for virtual experiences, and we know that we'll never have the resources to take every single Ontarian to a farm, but when they can go to a website and meet the farm family, and if they have the VR goggles, they can put them on and literally immerse themselves in that barn or that experience. They're fun. I often watch them in flat mode, and then I'll remember to go get the goggles and put them on, and wow, they are so immersive. And, back in the days when we had booths at the Royal, and you see kids put our goggles on, and at one point there's a sheep that kind of brushes by the camera operator, and when you're immersed in that pasture experience, that sheep you feel is going to knock you over, and you can see kids like put their feet up and jump back, and they're so cool. They're beautiful projects to work on, and I think last year, we had about a little over 1 million visitors to that website too. So the farm tour without getting your boots dirty.
I use them when I'm dealing with brokers that want to have a look at a barn that they can't get into. And we talk about getting people on farm. Even if you could get the people to the farm, there's certain operations such as poultry or hog operations that the farmers are not really going to want anyone to come through that barn due to biosecurity issues. And this is a fantastic way, whether it's your live tour with the cell phone or whether it's the 360 with the virtual goggles, it's a great opportunity for people to see what goes on in those farms and understand that the doors aren't locked because we're scared of people seeing it. The doors are locked because of another reason there. We're happy to show you what goes on behind those doors.
Such an important point. And the aunties, the people who aren't supportive of Ontario farmers, will often say they keep their barn doors locked because they have something to hide. I would argue that 7 days a week, because I never have farmers say no to my project, whether it's a field trip, whether it's coming in with a film crew for a whole VR filming experience, taking a group of food influencers out to a farm. I literally never have farmers say no to me. We're out on farms doing our faces behind food interviews. I've got 4 interviews set up in a couple of weeks, and my call to those first 4 farmers, Kelly, we'd be delighted to host you. Can't wait to see you. They're quietly proud of what they do. They've got interesting stories to show the world.
I think that's a problem, though, that they've always faced is they've got those great stories to tell, those interesting facts and operations, and don't want people to come through them because of the potential risk that you can have from biosecurity. I've never met a farmer that didn't want to tell you all about their operation. They're very proud of what they do.
They're a modest bunch, so sometimes they don't think that what they do is all that interesting. And I tell them that, every single thing they do all day is interesting to somebody who lives in a condo building in downtown Toronto. What's the phrase? What we find ordinary, somebody else finds extraordinary. And I feel like that's what we're trying to showcase here.
We had a recording a few weeks ago that we talked about disadvantaged youth that came from cities such as Toronto. And for them, they'd never seen any sort of a landscape that didn't include a large number of buildings, skyscrapers, or at very least houses that were close together. And they get out there and there's literally nothing. Like you're out in the middle of a forest, you're out in the middle of farmland. And that's something that I take for granted because this is the area that I grew up in there. My neighbors are quite a distance away, but that's not how the majority of Canadians see when they get up in the morning. They see buildings.
Years ago, when I worked for the Ontario Cattlemen's Association, I would be in the beef barn for 2 weeks in our exhibit answering questions about beef cattle. And I remember the one year, I think it was a grade 4 or a grade 5 class from downtown Toronto, and they walked into the barn, and I was right as you walked in, and the teacher said to the kids, "Look at all the horses." And they were beef cattle. And it was such a realization for me that we're not just educating the kids, we're I don't
Everybody.
know what you don't know. And so, we started with, well, these are beef cattle, and here's why they're here. And we introduced them to a few of the farmers that were working close by. And it was just one of those moments to me that, you think you're talking to the little one, but you're talking to the whole family because, especially at the Royal Winter Fair, those people are getting to experience farm culture without ever leaving the city. And I think those kind of opportunities are magical.
I think they are. A few years ago, I had an opportunity to interact with some members from my wife's family. We had a get together in Toronto, and we ended up traveling up to where their family settled, which was in Creemore. So Toronto to Creemore. And I rode in a car with people from Western Canada and basically from cities. And we spent probably an hour looking at different fields. Well, what's that? Well, what's that? What does that barn do? What's in that barn? What's that crop there? And then it's like that field there, that's soybeans. No, that one's alfalfa. And those conversations made me realize just how much, because I grew up in that and I'm immersed in that, how much I take for granted where somebody else drives through that countryside and they have not a clue what it is that they're looking at.
Yeah, my coworkers joke that I can't help myself from spouting random pieces of agricultural trivia when we're on the road, and you know what? I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I am too. I was asked. I was asked a question. The difference between a cornfield, whether it's for livestock feed or whether it's sweet corn for human feed. And we just happened to drive by a field of sweet corn. I said, well, if you look to the right, that's field corn, and if you look to the left, that one's sweet corn. How do you know? And it's like I had to actually stop and think about what it was, the cues that I was looking at that told me that that was sweet corn and not field corn. We take it for granted. It's not something that everyone else out there really gets that experience.
We joke at Farm and Food Care that we have so many I love my job days because you get out and you have the chance to meet somebody and you see the impact of that heifer's nose sticking into the back of their car for their kids to pat. Or when Kathleen Wynne was our premier, she came to a breakfast on the farm and one of the egg farmers put a newly hatched chick into her hand. The look of awe and joy on her face, it's still one of my favorite photos in our collection. You just never know who you're reaching.
That's true. You've made quite a career out of reaching people at Farm and Food Care, and this is a special year for you. This is 10 years that Farm and Food Care Ontario has been in existence. What have you got planned?
It's gone by in a flash. Some of our board members have been around since the beginning or even before the beginning. A lovely man named Richard Blylevin, who was the chair of Ag Care, one of our sister groups back 10 or 12 years ago. He's chairing our 10th anniversary committee right now, and he takes such pride in looking at where we've come from. So, I think back to those days, those discussions between the Ontario Farm Animal Council and Ag Care about amalgamating, and then we did become 10 years old on January the 1st was our 10th anniversary. We now have sister groups in Saskatchewan and Prince Edward Island, and we do some far-reaching national work with our publication, The Real Dirt on Farming, and those VR tours are viewed by people around the world. So sometimes we're not good enough at touting our own horn, but we're really proud of where we've come. And I think, just the future's really bright for us. Our members have been incredibly supportive during COVID, wanting us to survive and thrive past the pandemic. And we have an annual conference coming up on April the 13th, and that will be kind of the start of our celebrations. We're going to be doing kind of a year-long fundraising and membership campaign because I think there's a lot of farmers out on the back roads of Ontario that don't realize that they can support us directly. Join the cause. Help us help you tell your story. You'll see more of that coming up. And then we're planning a big birthday party in our parking lot later next summer for our friends and supporters. And you're going to see kind of a whole year worth of activities all centered around that, 10 years and more to come basics theme. Stay tuned. But I mean, for any of your listeners, we are entirely funded by farmers, by farm organizations, by agribusinesses. We could not do it without them. And the more supporters we have, the more we can do.
And you've certainly reached a lot of people, particularly in these last 2 years when initially the thought would be like, oh my goodness, we're in trouble. And then to reach out and talk about 1 million people having a look at your 360 website and over 200,000 that you reached through your tours. Those are tremendous numbers. That's a tremendous success story there to be able to say, hey, we reached these people.
And I should mention, too, that we got our charitable status 2 years ago, so that gives us a whole new venue in terms of fundraising. So if somebody does want to support us, it's as easy as going to our website, clicking a button, and you get a tax receipt for it, too, which is an added bonus now.
That always appeals to people as well. That's a great added bonus to it, but it's a great organization that does great work there. Now, we'd be remiss if we didn't also mention that this year is more than just an anniversary of 10 years for Farm and Food Care Ontario. You've been executive director now for 5 years, been with the organization and a precursor, the Ontario Farm Animal Council, for 18. But for the past 5, you've been the executive director. Did you ever think that this is where you would end up with the organization when you started doing some of this?
When I got the job at the Ontario Farm Animal Council, I thought it would be a cool couple of years. And I remember thinking this job was going to, introduce me to an awful lot of people, and I would probably be here 2 years. So 2 years times 9 and 18 years have passed. I was always the farm kid growing up, and I think I always wore my heart on my sleeve, and I was one of those school bus kids coming into my high school and in 4-H, and I was in junior farmers. And I remember when I got this job, one of my high school friends laughed when he called me to congratulate me, and he said, and look at that, you now have the word farm in your email address. I am great having the word farm in my email address. It still makes me smile, and this was a really good career path for me, starting as a small town newspaper reporter. I had amazing years at the Ontario Cattlemen's Association, and I'm continuing to love what I do here.
We love having you on. It's been a thrill to have you back again. Our first repeat guest. It's been super to be able to talk to you. We've talked a bit about pivoting during the pandemic here. Some of you may have noticed that there was a little bit of a change in the audio quality halfway through. We lost audio on Kelly and she dialed in with her phone, and so we pivoted. And it's been a bit of a challenge today because of some of the internet issues that we've had, but we're thrilled to have been able to speak to you today, Kelly.
Thanks so much, Mike, for having me back. I appreciate the chance to talk about what we do here.
Join us next time when we'll be discussing the state of agriculture in Ontario with our very special guest, the Ontario Minister of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, the Honourable Lisa Thompson. That's next time on The Back 40. You've been listening to The Back 40, brought to you by Trillium Mutual Insurance. Be sure to subscribe to The Back 40 wherever you find your favorite podcasts so that you don't miss an episode. The Back 40, bringing the ag community together one podcast at a time. I'm Mike Brine. Until next time, take care and stay safe.